Sometimes the most ordinary-looking photos take on a chilling weight when we realize they were captured just moments before history changed forever. 15. A gazing figure, Native American, overlooking the new railroad, circa 1867. Some photographs speak louder in silence than in spectacle. This image, taken by Alfred A. Hart sometime between 1865 and 1869, captures one such moment, a lone Native American figure standing on the Palisades, gazing down at the fresh tracks of the Transcontinental Railroad stretching across the California landscape. At first glance, it appears a simple composition, just a solitary silhouette against rock and sky, but the weight of the photograph rests in its symbolism. Below the figure, steel rails carve a bold new path, while above, the person remains rooted in quiet observation. It is as if two worlds, ancient tradition and encroaching modernity, have been frozen together in a single frame. The Transcontinental Railroad, completed in 1869, was one of America's most ambitious undertakings. Linking East and West for the first time, it promised speed, commerce, and settlement on a scale previously unimaginable. But for native peoples, the Iron Road signaled displacement, cultural upheaval, and the erasure of lands long held sacred. This photograph embodies that duality, progress celebrated by one world, foreboding to another. The subject's posture, upright, steady, contemplative, invites interpretation. Was the photographer deliberately framing a metaphor for what was being lost, or was it simply a candid presence, a local inhabitant, caught in a moment of curiosity? The ambiguity enhances the power of the photo, leaving the viewer to wrestle with its meaning. Hart, who served as the official photographer of the Central Pacific Railroad, produced over 350 stereo views documenting the line's construction, while most of his work focused on engineering marvels, blasting crews, and iron spans. This rare image departs from celebration to strike a more contemplative tone. It is, perhaps unintentionally, a portrait of cultural crossroads, one where the march of industry overshadowed the continuity of older ways of life. Today, this photograph survives not only as a record of a railroad, but as a haunting meditation on perspective. For some, it is a snapshot of triumph, the nation stitching itself together. For others, it is a reminder of loss, watching from the margins as the ground beneath them was transformed forever. In the figure's gaze, silent yet unyielding, we glimpse a history of resilience amid inevitable change. 14. Wilbur Wright circles the Statue of Liberty, aerial innovation in 1909. In 1909, the dream of human flight was still in its infancy, yet its pioneers were already reshaping the imagination of the modern world. Among them, Wilbur Wright, half of the legendary Wright brothers, staged one of the most breathtaking demonstrations of early aviation. On September 29, 1909, he piloted his fragile Model A flyer in a daring loop around the Statue of Liberty, cementing the link between innovation, spectacle, and symbolism. The photograph, later featured prominently on the front page of Harper's Weekly, captures Wright soaring above New York Harbor. Against the backdrop of the colossal Statue of Liberty, his craft appears small and delicate, held together by wires and canvas. Yet its presence in the skies above Lady Liberty spoke volumes. Human ingenuity had risen to claim the heavens. The flight was part of the Hudson-Fulton celebration, an event commemorating both Henry Hudson's 1609 voyage up the river and Robert Fulton's first steamboat journey. Organizers sought a spectacle that would honor past achievements while showcasing future promise, and Wright delivered. His flight was not only a marvel of engineering, but also a symbolic salute to progress itself. Flying a Model A was no casual undertaking. The plane had no enclosed cockpit, no modern controls, and little room for error. Wright circled the statue at just under 400 feet, steering with delicate precision, all while buffeted by unpredictable harbor winds. The crowd below, thousands strong, watched in awe as the fragile machine defied gravity and framed the Statue of Liberty in an entirely new light. This performance was more than a stunt, it was a statement. At a time when skepticism about aviation still lingered, Wright's flight silenced doubters and sparked fascination. It signaled that flight was not a novelty, but a coming revolution, with possibilities far beyond anyone's imagination. For New Yorkers and for Americans at large, it became a moment of pride. The Statue of Liberty, symbol of freedom, was now joined in the sky by a symbol of progress. Today, the image remains a vivid reminder of a turning point in history when the impossible became visible before ordinary eyes. Wilbur Wright's daring circle around Lady Liberty was more than a feat of aviation. It was a declaration that the future had arrived, carried on the wings of innovation. 13th. First view from the top, opening day at the Empire State Building. There are moments when architecture transcends brick and steel, becoming something symbolic. This rare photograph, captured by Samuel Gottscho in 1931, freezes one such moment, the very first public glimpse from the Empire State Building's observation deck. For those who stood there, looking out over the rising skyline of New York City, it was more than a view. It was a promise of possibility. The Empire State Building was conceived in the depths of the Great Depression, a time when optimism seemed in short supply. Yet its construction became an emblem of resilience. Rising 1,454 feet into the sky, the building opened its doors to the public on May 1st, 1931. At the time, it was the tallest building in the world, a staggering feat of ambition and engineering that captured global attention. Gottscho's lens transports us to that first day, as visitors pressed against the railings of the observation deck, drinking in a perspective no one had ever experienced before. The photograph reveals not just the scale of the building, but the awe it inspired. Beneath them, New York stretched outward in every direction, a living, breathing organism of industry, culture, and constant change. Above them, the sky seemed limitless, mirroring the ambition that had made the tower possible. For those early visitors, the experience must have been surreal. To stand higher than any other structure on Earth, looking down on the city that never sleeps, offered both pride and humility. Many came seeking distraction from economic hardship, yet, in this soaring space, they found something greater, a sense that progress and human ingenuity could rise even in the hardest of times. The Empire State Building's observation deck quickly became more than a tourist attraction. It became a rite of passage. From marriage proposals to cinematic fame in films like King Kong, the deck has cemented itself as a cultural icon. But Gottscho's image remains unique, the first visual proof of how this towering creation reshaped not only the skyline but also the way people experienced it. This photograph isn't just about height or architecture, it's about perspective. On that opening day in 1931, the Empire State Building gave people a new way to see their world, a reminder that even in troubled times, humanity is capable of reaching higher than ever imagined. 12. The birth of the Tube, London's first underground journey. Every great city has a heartbeat, and in London, that rhythm began pulsing underground in the mid-19th century. This rare photograph captures the trial runs of the world's first subterranean railway, the Metropolitan Railway, a project that would forever change how humanity moves through cities. By the 1850s, London was choking on its own success. The booming industrial capital was overwhelmed with horse-drawn traffic, and the streets above groaned under the pressure of millions trying to get from one district to another. The idea of tunneling beneath the bustling streets sounded more like science fiction than civic planning. Yet necessity demanded invention, and visionaries began carving the path for what would become the London Underground. This photograph shows one of the earliest trial journeys on the Metropolitan Railway, just before its public opening in 1863. Look closely, and you can see not only the novelty of the setting, but the curiosity in the faces of those experiencing something unprecedented. Travel beneath the earth. These first carriages, lit by gas lamps, rattled along smoky tunnels that were carved out by sheer determination, grit, and muscle. To us, accustomed to sleek, modern trains, the scene looks almost primitive, but in its time, it was nothing short of revolutionary. Imagine sitting in a carriage, hearing the roar of iron wheels echo through a dark enclosed tunnel for the very first time. For passengers, it was equal parts marvel and unease, excitement tempered by the strange sensation of moving where no natural light could reach. Some worried about safety, others about breathing in the smoky air, but the undeniable convenience was enough to ensure its success. By the end of its first year, over 9 million people had traveled on the Metropolitan Railway, proving that the city had embraced the underground way of life. The opening of the Metropolitan Railway was more than a marvel of Victorian engineering. It was a turning point for urban living worldwide. What began as a bold experiment beneath the streets of London became a model that inspired subway systems in cities across the globe, from Paris to New York to Tokyo. This image, though modest, marks the beginning of a global transformation. The first journey on London's underground wasn't just a ride, it was the start of a new chapter in human mobility, one that redefined what it meant for a city to move. 11. Scrambling for peace. Officers clambering to witness the treaty signing. Its opening tone. Some moments in history carry such gravity that even seasoned leaders lose their composure. This rare photograph, taken on June 28, 1919, inside the Palace of Versailles, captures one of those moments. It shows officers and politicians clambering over furniture, leaning through windows, and pressing against doors, each desperate to glimpse the signing of the Treaty of Versailles. World War I had dragged on for 4 devastating years, leaving Europe shattered. By 1919, the Allied powers gathered in the Grand Hall of Mirrors to finalize peace with Germany. The treaty being signed that day was more than ink on paper. It was a document that symbolized closure for millions who had endured unspeakable hardship. For the men in that room, many of whom had lived the war not just as decision-makers, but as survivors, the ceremony marked the culmination of an era defined by conflict. The image is striking in its informality. Distinguished officers in uniform and polished politicians abandon their dignity as they crowd onto chairs, stretch over tables, and crane their necks for a view. The desperation is almost childlike, yet deeply human. These were not just observers of history, they were participants, determined not to miss the precise instant when the world, at least in theory, moved from war to peace. But what adds a haunting layer to this photo is hindsight. While those present believed they were witnessing the dawn of a lasting peace, history tells a different story. The Treaty of Versailles, with its harsh terms imposed on Germany, planted the seeds of resentment that would later help ignite World War II. In this light, the image becomes more than a snapshot of relief. It becomes a reminder of how fragile peace can be and how easily victory can carry the shadows of future conflict. The photograph endures, not because it shows the great signatures or the gilded hall, but because it captures the raw humanity of those who were there, men leaning and scrambling, eager to see history unfold. In their urgency, we glimpse both the hope and the naivety of a generation desperate to believe the nightmare was over. For a fleeting moment, peace seemed tangible, and this image freezes that fragile hope in time. 10. Lincoln before Gettysburg, the sole confirmed image. Some photographs only reveal their true weight decades after the shutter clicks. At first glance, this blurred 1863 image seems to show nothing more than a crowded gathering at the dedication of the Soldiers' National Cemetery in Gettysburg, but hidden within the indistinct figures is one of history's most recognizable leaders, Abraham Lincoln. On November 19th, 1863, Lincoln arrived in Gettysburg to deliver what would become one of the most famous speeches in American history. At just over 2 minutes long, the Gettysburg Address redefined the Civil War as not merely a battle for the Union, but a struggle for human equality and a rebirth of American ideals. Yet, ironically, there was little effort at the time to document Lincoln visually that day. The event was seen as solemn, but not historic. No one anticipated that the president's brief words would echo through centuries. The image was captured by photographer David Backrack, a young man just 19 years old at the time. The plate shows rows of people sitting and standing in anticipation of the ceremonies. Lincoln is there too, hatless, seated among the crowd. But for nearly 90 years, his presence went unnoticed. The photograph was considered ordinary until archivist Josephine Cobb studied it in 1952. By enlarging the glass plate negative, she identified Lincoln's distinct features, bringing the hidden president into focus for the first time. The discovery transformed the photograph into a priceless artifact. Unlike posed portraits that capture Lincoln in statesmanlike dignity, this fleeting image shows him as just another man in the crowd, waiting, listening, preparing to deliver words that would outlast his own lifetime. The ordinariness makes it all the more powerful. The figure who would define that day in history almost fades into the background, reminding us that history often hides in plain sight. Today, this rare photograph is more than a visual record. It's a quiet testament to the unpredictability of legacy. What was once dismissed as an unremarkable crowd scene is now revered as the only known image of Lincoln at Gettysburg, taken just moments before he spoke words that continue to shape how America understands its past and its promise. It is proof that sometimes history doesn't announce itself. It waits to be uncovered. 9. Forced to confront. German POWs view concentration camp footage, 1945. History is not only shaped by battles won and treaties signed, it is also shaped by reckoning. This striking photograph, taken on July 3, 1945, shows German prisoners of war held at Halloran General Hospital on Staten Island, New York, gathered in a dim room to watch films documenting the horrors uncovered in Nazi concentration camps. The photograph freezes a powerful moment. Rows of captured soldiers sit in chairs, their faces illuminated by the flickering light of the projector. Some sit rigid, others avert their gaze, while a few cover their eyes or mouths in visible anguish. The stark scene captures the emotional collision between denial and reality, as men who once fought for the regime are forced to confront its crimes in full. By mid-1945, Allied forces had liberated concentration camps across Europe: Buchenwald, Dachau, Bergen-Belsen, Auschwitz, revealing evidence of mass death on a scale that shocked even hardened soldiers. To prevent these atrocities from being dismissed as propaganda, the Allies filmed what they found: piles of bodies, emaciated survivors, the machinery of mass murder. These reels were then shown not only to the world but deliberately to German prisoners of war abroad. The screenings were part of a broader Allied denazification strategy. The aim was not vengeance, but exposure, to strip away excuses, to confront soldiers with the undeniable truth of the regime they had served, whether willingly or under orders. For many in the room, the moment was transformative. Eyewitness accounts note that some POWs wept, while others sat in stunned silence. The shock in their expressions, captured here in still form, suggests the heavy psychological weight of realizing that the war they had fought was inseparable from unimaginable cruelty. This photograph resonates because it captures an uneasy but necessary confrontation with accountability. It is not a triumphant image, but a sobering one, a reminder that history requires acknowledgement, even from those who may prefer not to see. For the Allies, ensuring these men bore witness was not only about justice, but also about preventing such horrors from being hidden, denied, or repeated. The power of this photograph lies in its silence. Rows of men, faces half lit, watching as the darkest truths of their time play out on screen. It is a portrait of reckoning, an uncomfortable but essential step in the long and painful process of remembrance. 8. Kathrine Switzer, breaking barriers at the 1967 Boston Marathon. Sometimes, a single photograph captures more than an event. It captures a movement. This iconic image from 1967 freezes a dramatic moment when Kathrine Switzer, wearing bib number 261, was physically confronted by race official Jock Semple during the Boston Marathon. What began as an attempt to stop her became a defining spark for gender equality in sports. At the time, marathon running was strictly considered a man's domain. Women were not officially allowed to compete in long-distance races, as the prevailing belief was that the strain was too much for them. Switzer, a passionate runner and student at Syracuse University, challenged this by registering under the gender-neutral initials KV Switzer. When race officials overlooked the detail, she lined up on that cold April morning with hundreds of men determined simply to run. The photograph captures the instant when Semple lunged at her mid-race, trying to tear away her bib. His face is contorted with anger, while Switzer pushes forward in shock, her boyfriend Tom Miller intervening to shove Semple off the course. The scene is chaotic, but the symbolism is crystal clear. One woman refusing to step aside, running quite literally through barriers that others tried to impose. For Switzer, the incident was frightening in the moment but profoundly motivating. Rather than discouraging her, the confrontation steeled her resolve. She finished the marathon in 4 hours and 20 minutes, proving wrong every doubter who claimed women were physically unfit for the distance. Later, she recalled how the attempt to eject her only made her realize how urgently the world needed change. That defiant run in 1967 became more than a personal achievement, it became history. Kathrine Switzer went on to champion women's running worldwide, organizing events, writing books, and advocating for inclusion. By 1972, the Boston Marathon officially allowed female participants. Today, women make up nearly half of marathon runners, a testament to her trailblazing courage. This image of Kathrine Switzer reminds us that sometimes the greatest revolutions are not fought in grand halls, but on everyday roads, one determined step at a time. What began as an act of exclusion transformed into a symbol of empowerment, forever changing the course of sports history. 7. Paris under watchful eyes, Minot's secret lens. When we think of Paris, we imagine lively cafes, elegant boulevards, and a city that breathes freedom. But during World War II, the very heart of France was shrouded in silence and fear. Beneath its surface charm, the city carried the weight of an occupying force, and one photographer's lens quietly captured it all. The German occupation of Paris began in June 1940 and lasted until August 1944. Life for Parisians was profoundly altered. German troops patrolled the streets, resources were rationed, and censorship gripped daily life. Yet, at first glance, photographs from this period show ordinary scenes. People shopping at markets, couples strolling, children playing. French photographer André Zucker, sometimes mistakenly associated with the pseudonym Minot, was one of the few to document these moments in color. Using Agfacolor film provided by the Nazis, he produced images that felt almost deceptively normal. They reveal smiling faces and sunlit avenues, a Paris that seemed untouched. But what makes them unsettling is precisely what they omit: the arrests, the fear, the hidden resistance, and the shadow of oppression that could not be openly photographed. To modern eyes, these pictures strike a chilling balance. On one hand, they show a city that continued to function under occupation, its beauty and routine persisting despite the war. On the other, they remind us that appearances can be deeply misleading. The calm of a cafe terrace might conceal collaborators at work, or passers-by glancing away from an officer to avoid suspicion. These photographs have sparked debate. Were they propaganda showing a softened image of occupation? Or were they, in their quiet way, a record of resilience? A reminder that even under foreign rule, Parisians still lived, loved, and endured? The truth likely lies in both interpretations. For those who study them now, the pictures serve as haunting evidence that history is never black and white, but often framed in shades of gray. Through Zucker's controversial yet invaluable lens, we glimpse a Paris that looks deceptively normal, yet beneath every quiet moment was the heavy weight of a city surviving under watchful eyes. 6. The last known photograph of the Titanic. Some photographs capture joy, some capture history, and a few capture tragedy before it happens. The last known image of the RMS Titanic is one such photograph. a haunting reminder of how quickly hope can sink into sorrow. It was April 10th, 1912, when the Titanic departed from Southampton, England, on her maiden voyage bound for New York. Heralded as the largest and most luxurious ship of her time, she was celebrated as unsinkable. Families gathered at the docks, waving farewell as the great liner slipped into open waters. Cameras clicked, preserving what seemed to be a triumphant new chapter in maritime history. One particular image stands out, taken by Father Francis Brown, a Jesuit priest and amateur photographer. It shows the Titanic as she eased away from port. To the casual eye, it's a routine departure shot, a proud vessel beginning her journey. But in hindsight, the photograph has taken on an almost ghostly quality. It became the last known image of the Titanic afloat, a final frozen moment before the unthinkable unfolded. Just 4 days later, on the night of April 14th, 1912, the Titanic struck an iceberg in the North Atlantic. In less than 3 hours, she would slip beneath the waves, taking over 1,500 lives with her. Survivors recalled the chilling screams in the darkness, the bitter cold, and the disbelief that the unsinkable ship was gone. Against this backdrop, Brown's photo became more than a memory. It became an eerie relic tied forever to the disaster. Today, the picture is more than just a maritime snapshot. It represents ambition, human error, and the fragility of even our greatest achievements. The calm image of the Titanic leaving port contrasts sharply with the chaos that would follow, reminding us how quickly history can turn. It's a symbol of optimism shadowed by tragedy, of progress marred by loss. The last photograph of the Titanic is not dramatic. It is quiet, ordinary, almost serene. And perhaps that's why it chills us most. It captures the calm before one of the most devastating maritime tragedies in history, a moment forever frozen between promise and catastrophe. 5. Martin Luther King Jr.'s final public image. Some photographs are remembered not only for who they show, but for what they foreshadow. This image of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis has become one of the most haunting of the 20th century. It was April 3rd, 1968. Dr. King had come to Memphis to support striking sanitation workers, a cause deeply tied to his mission for justice and equality. The atmosphere was tense. Threats against his life were mounting, yet his resolve never faltered. That very evening, he would deliver what came to be known as his prophetic "I've been to the mountaintop" speech, a message filled with both courage and an uncanny sense of finality. Captured by Joseph Lau, a South African photographer who was staying at the Lorraine Motel, the image shows Dr. King standing on the balcony, speaking with friends and colleagues. Around him are men who would later be among the first to rush to his side, Reverend Jesse Jackson and Ralph Abernathy. To the casual viewer, the picture could be mistaken for an ordinary moment of conversation, but history has weighted it heavily. It stands as one of the last public images of Dr. King before tragedy struck. On April 4th, as the sun began to set, a single gunshot rang out. Dr. King fell on that very balcony, his life cut short at just 39 years old. The photograph, taken less than 24 hours earlier, instantly became more than a record of time. It became a symbol of the fragility of life and of the unfinished dream he left behind. The power of the image lies in its quietness. There is no drama in the frame, just a man standing, speaking, unaware of how little time remained. That ordinariness makes it all the more haunting. The world would lose a leader but gain a martyr, and the photograph has since come to embody both the hope and the tragedy of the civil rights movement. Martin Luther King Jr.'s final public image reminds us of the cost of progress and the sacrifice behind the freedoms we often take for granted. It freezes in time, the last calm before an act of violence that shook the world, and it endures as both a warning and a call to continue the work he began. 4. Tank Man, the lone protester and the symbol of peaceful defiance. Some photographs do not merely capture a moment, they crystallize an idea, one so powerful it echoes across generations. taken on June 5, 1989, on Beijing's Chang'an Avenue. The image of a lone man standing before a line of advancing tanks has become one of the most iconic symbols of resistance in modern history. The man, carrying nothing more threatening than shopping bags, steps directly into the path of several rumbling Type 59 tanks. As they grind to a halt, he shifts, blocking them again each time they attempt to maneuver around him. The photograph captures this fleeting but monumental act of defiance. One human being, fragile and unarmed, refusing to yield before a machine of war. The scene unfolded just one day after Chinese troops violently cleared pro-democracy demonstrators from Tiananmen Square. The protests, led primarily by students, had called for political reforms, freedom of expression, and an end to government corruption. The military crackdown left hundreds, possibly more, dead, though the exact number remains unknown. The following morning, as armored columns withdrew from the city center, Tank Man appeared, turning a routine movement of machinery into a moment of timeless protest. What makes the image even more haunting is the enduring mystery of the man himself. His name, background, and fate have never been confirmed. Some speculate he was arrested and executed, while others believe he slipped back into anonymity. In the absence of answers, he remains a symbol, his anonymity reinforcing the universality of his act. He could be anyone and every man standing against injustice. Captured by photographers like Jeff Widener of the Associated Press and Stuart Franklin of Magnum Photos, the image quickly spread around the world despite censorship attempts. It has since been hailed as one of the most influential photographs of the 20th century. To this day, it remains a forbidden subject in mainland China, where government censors tightly restrict discussion and display of the event. The photograph of Tank Man is more than just a record of defiance. It is a mirror of human courage in its purest form. Though history may never reveal his name, his silent stand continues to remind the world of the extraordinary power of ordinary people when they refuse to step aside. 3. Moments before tragedy, Diana's final photograph. Some photographs linger in history not because of what they show, but because of what they foreshadow. One such image is the last known photograph of Princess Diana, taken in the early hours of August 31st, 1997, just moments before the world would lose her forever. The photo, captured inside a black Mercedes-Benz, shows Diana seated quietly in the rear, with her companion, Dodi Fayed, beside her. Only the back of her head and her distinct blonde hair are visible. To most, it is an unremarkable angle, yet it carries immeasurable weight. In the frame, the driver and bodyguard can be seen ahead, steering through the Paris night. Moments later, the car would enter the Pont de l'Alma tunnel, where tragedy struck. By then, Diana was one of the most photographed women on Earth. Wherever she went, the press followed. That pursuit was relentless on the night of her death, with paparazzi chasing the vehicle as it sped away from the Ritz Hotel. The haunting irony is that the very act of capturing her image, something that defined much of her public life, would continue right up until her final moments. What makes this photograph so unsettling is its quiet normalcy. Diana is not looking toward the camera, not posing, not smiling. She is simply present, unaware that this fleeting moment of ordinary calm would be immortalized in the shadow of extraordinary tragedy. It is this stillness, against the knowledge of what was to come, that makes the image feel almost prophetic. For many, the photograph has come to symbolize the tension between Diana's private humanity and her public existence as a global icon. In life, she was celebrated as the people's princess, admired for her compassion, vulnerability, and ability to connect across boundaries. Yet, in death, this final glimpse reminds us of the pressures and intrusions that accompanied her fame. Today, the photograph remains one of the most haunting in modern history. It does not sensationalize. It shows no spectacle, no drama, only a fleeting instant that gained power through the passage of time. When we look at it now, we are reminded not just of a tragic accident, but of the fragile humanity of someone the world placed on a pedestal. 2. The final moments aboard Japan Airlines Flight 123. Some photographs, when looked at in hindsight, carry with them a gravity that words alone cannot convey. One such image is among the last known pictures taken aboard Japan Airlines Flight 123, the deadliest single aircraft accident in aviation history. The photograph, believed to have been captured during the routine climb shortly after takeoff from Tokyo's Haneda Airport on August 12, 1985, appears ordinary at first glance. Passengers are seen seated, calm and unaware, with nothing in the frame to suggest the tragedy looming ahead. It's this very ordinariness that makes the image so haunting. Within minutes of the shutter closing, catastrophe would unfold. The aircraft, a Boeing 747SR carrying 524 people bound for Osaka, had departed at 6:12 p.m. Just 12 minutes into the flight, a catastrophic structural failure occurred. The rear pressure bulkhead, previously repaired after a tail strike incident years earlier, ruptured, leading to explosive decompression. Hydraulic systems were severed, robbing the plane of nearly all control. For the next half hour, the crew fought valiantly to stabilize the crippled aircraft, using only engine thrust to maneuver. Passengers endured a harrowing ordeal as the 747 swayed and lost altitude over the Japanese countryside. The calmness of the photo, taken just moments before, stands in heartbreaking contrast to the chaos that would soon follow. At 6:56 p.m., after 32 agonizing minutes in the air, Flight 123 crashed into Mount Takamagahara in Gunma Prefecture. Only 4 of the 524 people on board survived. The accident remains a stark reminder of the fragility of aviation safety when mechanical oversight meets human tragedy. What makes this image endure in memory is not just its association with disaster, but the humanity it preserves. The faces of ordinary travelers, families, workers, children, sitting together on what should have been an uneventful domestic flight, now stand frozen in time. It is a reminder that behind every statistic lies a story, and behind every story, a life. Decades later, the photograph is still viewed with a mixture of sorrow and reverence. It does not dramatize the disaster. Instead, it captures a fleeting instant of calm before the unthinkable. In doing so, it speaks both to the fragility of life and the responsibility of history to remember. 1. St. Paul's Cathedral by night, light amidst the Blitz. On December 29, 1940, the skies above London turned into a nightmare of fire and ash. The Luftwaffe launched one of the most devastating air raids of World War II, remembered today as the Second Great Fire of London. Entire neighborhoods were engulfed in flames, yet out of this destruction came a single, unforgettable image. St. Paul's Cathedral rising from the smoke, illuminated but unbroken. The photograph, captured by Herbert Mason for the Daily Mail, shows the great dome of St. Paul's glowing faintly against the darkness, while the city around it burns. It was taken at the height of the Blitz, a relentless German bombing campaign meant to break the spirit of the British people. On this night alone, hundreds of bombers dropped incendiaries across central London, destroying historic sites, offices and homes. But against all odds, St. Paul's survived. Firefighters battled flames just yards from its foundation, racing across rooftops to extinguish fires that could have spread into the cathedral itself. Many later described its survival as nothing short of miraculous. For Londoners at the time, and for those who saw the image printed the next morning, the photograph became far more than a piece of news. It was a symbol of hope. At a moment when despair seemed inevitable, this one building standing tall reassured the public that not everything had been lost. St. Paul's Cathedral, with its resilient dome, became a beacon of endurance. Prime Minister Winston Churchill himself ordered that the cathedral be protected at all costs, understanding its psychological weight in Britain's wartime struggle. Looking back today, the image remains haunting. It's not just a record of survival, but a reminder of how symbols can lift an entire nation in its darkest hours. While much of London would take years to rebuild, St. Paul's stood as proof that even in destruction, there can be light. This photograph endures as one of the most iconic images of the 20th century, an emblem of resilience, hope, and the quiet defiance of a city that refused to break.